straight red card. All right, Brett. It was the big draw today, the big World Cup draw. You know, I actually missed most of it. I had to catch like the last hour and all the commentary with, you know, all the soccer studs on ESPN. And by that I mean, of course, Tight Shirt and his buddies there on ESPN. And, you know, most of those guys were pretty negative. The U.S.'s chances of making it out of this group. And I think maybe, you know, if we play really crummy, sure. I mean, we're not going to get out. But anybody that plays crummy is not going to get out. But here we are. Group G, we drew Germany, Ghana, and Portugal. And we have some history with some of these teams already, as you well know. I mean, let's start with Ghana. I mean, we can't beat this team in a World Cup, it seems like.
Third World Cup in a row we're playing against them.
Yeah.
Third World... Has that happened?
No, it probably doesn't. Maybe it happened early on in the World Cups. I've had a chance to look at because there were fewer teams in the actual field, so you ended up playing the same guys all the time. But, you know, you're right. I mean, it is odd. But you know what? I think our chances are better this time than they were last time. Michael Essien is 4 years older, and frankly, he's just not as good. And you go down the list of players. Was Asamoah Gyan. He went to Sunderland, played 30 or so games over 2 seasons and just kind of fell out of it. And now he's playing in the United Arab Emirates, yet he is still on this national team. And I think what really makes this team vulnerable, Ghana very vulnerable, well, their goalkeeping was never, you know, and that's never been a strong point for them. So
let's be fair. That 2010 match, you know, that goalie came up with some pretty big saves.
Yeah, that was kind of surprising.
He had an amazing game.
Yeah, well, all their goalkeepers now, the guys that are most likely to start. One goalkeeper is Fatau Dauda, and he plays for the Orlando Pirates in South Africa. Not exactly a stellar league. And then you have Adam Larsson, who plays in Scandinavia. Those are their likely starters goalkeeper. Both of them, I think, are fairly weak, and they're both, well, Adam Larsson's only 25 years old. And you like your goalkeeper to be a little bit older than that. You know, kind of, you know, goalkeepers get better with age, around 27, 28 through 33. You know, goalkeepers seem to turn into fine wine. And then their defense, Brett, is really not impressive at all. You've got, of the defenders likely to go, 3 of them play in South Africa. All right, again, not a strong lead. One plays for a semi-okay team in Turkey. Another plays for a semi-okay team in Tunisia. You got another guy playing in Portugal for Vitória. And then, of course, Daniel Opare plays in Standard Liège. You know, that's not a really strong group of defenders. So I think they'll be vulnerable in the back. Their midfield will be strong. Strikers will probably be fine. But I think even more than last time, they're more vulnerable in the back than they were. So I think that's our opportunity.
Well, and to be fair, I mean, we're looking at a backline for the United States that consists of potentially 3 MLS players and a converted left midfielder to left back. Well, so I mean, while you know, I have full confidence in some of our defenders. Not full confidence. I have confidence in some of our defenders.
You have 80% confidence.
But you know, sometimes, especially when it comes to games like this, it's not necessarily, you know, if you're consistently playing for a top team. It's just how well you play in these games. Hell, last World Cup, I mean, we had like 3 injured players that were literally injured just before the World Cup that came back and started playing. And mind you, they weren't stellar by any means either, but they did their job well enough to get us through the group, actually to win the group.
Yeah.
So I agree, not the strongest defense we're going to see, but still probably capable players.
I think, you know, if I had if I'm going to say, okay, which league is better, the South African or the Tunisian league or MLS, I'm going to say the MLS guys.
I'll say MLS as well.
Because honestly, I was on Simon Allen's show last night, and he said, Gonzalez should go play in the championship and I'm thinking the championship? No. Or the Bundesliga too? No. No. He should go play in Bundesliga. And I just disagree with Simon on it. I think Gonzalez is a better player than that. And I think Matt Bessler could be playing somewhere too. Again, we've had guys that have gone over maybe too early who were possibilities, potentials to play on the United States national team in a defensive role. And they went over like Tim Ream, and they did pretty
Poppycock.
I mean, let's be honest. I don't think Bessler would be in that role. I don't think Tim Ream and Bessler are comparable. I think Bessler's a better player, a smarter player, an older player. I think the same thing about Gonzalez. I think those guys have both got solid heads on their shoulders, and they're both solid all around. While Tim Ream could be kind of vulnerable defensively, he just really could handle the ball well and distribute from the back. That was his forte. I don't think anybody thought he was an amazing defender, but I think Gonzalez is. I think Bessler, those two guys are pretty darn good defenders. Maybe not as good as distributors, but pretty damn good, and I think they could play at mid-table level in the EPL.
You got to look at Cameron. Cameron's a prime example.
Yes.
He's he moved. He was moved back to the back line with Houston for the last couple seasons with them when he was with MLS, and now he's starting right back. Mm-hmm. He's pinched into the midfield before. He's played at center back, not only for the national team but also his club team. Big team comes knocking, which I don't think will necessarily, but if they want to, they can definitely do that. However, I think the best situation would be them find playing time like any player would want. Quite frankly, I mean, I don't see an issue with either of them just staying with their respective teams in MLS.
Well, I don't either. But, I guess the conversation started because the Galaxy have now used up all three of their DPs, one of them being on Gonzalez, who's your center back, and two of them with the guys all the way up top, Landon Donovan and Keane, which leaves their midfield. Don't you want one of your DPs to be an incredible midfield player so you can actually get the guys up top the ball and distribute the ball from the back to the front? I mean, it seems to me that was a hole. So, he just recommended that the Galaxy trade Gonzalez, get rid of him, transfer him, make some money. But if you're going to transfer him to a second division team in Germany or England, you're just not going to get your full bang for your buck. I think that there's more potential for Gonzalez. I just think he's going to be a better player than that. I think there were already Bundesliga teams that thought he was a better player than that. That's why he got a trial, right? I mean, that's why he was over in Germany before he got injured, being tackled by his U.S. teammate.
Speaking of that U.S. teammate,
yeah,
I've seen a lot of people really pushing that we need to bring Timmy out of the doghouse, and I'm like, well, I don't think he was ever really in the doghouse.
Yeah,
he just had that that whole fear of flying and
not only that,
wanting to make that large distance travel from halfway around the world.
I mean, the last game he played for us, he played like crap. Let's be honest.
He did.
But you know what?
I think a lot of people played like crap in that game.
That's true, but he kind of stood out because he got burned several times. But that was one game. You don't just bench a guy forever for one game. So will Timmy Chandler be back? Yes, as long as he can handle the flight from Europe to Brazil. It's a long one, and then there are 3 flights, obviously, or more, depending on how far we go within the World Cup group stages itself.
Here's my question at this point: Does Klinsmann bring him back into the fold now, when with the World Cup being just around the corner, literally? Or does he go with the core group of guys that got him to that situation?
I think it just depends on, as you mentioned early, injuries. We all know that Jurgen Klinsmann is in love with Brad Evans, and Brad's played really well. So has Brad solidified that spot? How injured is Cherundolo? Is he going to get a shot to come back as well before this is all said and done? Do you want to give Timmy another sniff? You have to, I think, give somebody else a sniff because you can't just depend on Evans and then maybe Cameron filling in that right back role because what happens if Bessler? You got left back, you got Fabian Johnson, who I think would pretty much solidify that role, but then you had Beasley jump in and solidify that role so we could play Fabian somewhere else. That still means, though, you need one more guy that can play left or right. I think Timmy could probably do that. So I think you got to give him another sniff. That's just my thought.
Well, yeah, and I mean, we know Timmy can do it. He's done it before in the past. He's been great on the right at times. Actually, for the most time, outside of that one game in Honduras, and then he's been acceptable on the left. pretty much shored up right now. I would like to have some more depth of player that can transition back and forth. I think Chandler would be a great position for that. However, I just don't know what is he going to want to make the constant travel, because I think at some point you can't just have a player that's going to just show up for the World Cup and then.
I think he would have showed up. He just wasn't ever called up. Recently he hasn't been called up because, for whatever reason. Okay, we talked about his fear of flying, but I don't think that's the reason he wasn't called up. We've been in Europe. He could have taken a train for those games. He just wasn't called up. And I think it was that one bad game. I think it's been his holding off for so long in the first place. And I think he's probably went through a mental battle there. Not only on his club team, but with the national team. I think his confidence level kind of wavered. There's we just went over Ghana, and we need to beat them. We need to start off strong. If we do not start off the group strong, it's got to be a win. It must be a win. We've got to get over the Ghana hump. It's got to happen. And then we've got Portugal next. Again, Brett, a team that's vulnerable. It's a vulnerable team. They've played really not very impressively during many rounds of qualifying. Did they squeak through? Sure. They beat Sweden. They got in. But it was all because of one guy who carried them on their back. And if you can shut that one guy down, which is easier said than done, you can make life difficult for Portugal. There are teams out there that have made it difficult for Portugal because their defense stinks. There's a lot, when Bruno Alves is still one of your starting defenders. Not that he's ancient or anything, but he's 32. He's no longer in the prime of his career. He's playing in Turkey. If that's your starting guy, or one of your starting guys, or one of the guys that's likely to make the team, I think that's kind of an example. I mean, listen, they tied Cyprus 4-4 at home. Cyprus. They lost to Denmark. They lost to Norway. They tied Israel 3-3. They tied Gabon, not exactly an African power. They tied Northern Ireland, not even a British power, for that matter, or a British Isles power. So, this team is vulnerable, and if Cristiano Ronaldo goes out there and he's frustrated, we've got a shot at that game too.
It's one of those teams that's very susceptible to getting scored upon, but they're also a team that can be very flashy and score as well.
Right.
And as you mentioned beforehand, with Ronaldo being there, he's the player to really watch. But then again, we can't just focus on him completely. We can then ignore the rest of the team because they are also very capable.
Yeah.
I think the Ghana game does need to be a win. The Portugal game at least has to be a draw.
Yes.
At the very least.
I
Or,
agree.
I mean, if you can flip-flop those, that's fine with me. I really don't care. We need 4 points going into Germany one way or the other.
Right.
6 would be wonderful.
Right.
But
it would be.
I'm not going to be a dreamer today. I'm not going to be a dreamer.
You're not. Well, I look at Portugal, and I've never been impressed with Nani. I'm sorry. I know he plays for Manchester United. I'm just not impressed with him. Now, does Pepe impress me? He has. He's 30 now. He's not like he was 4 years ago. I mean, he's still a solid player. Yeah, he plays on Real Madrid. There are good players on the team. There is not a bad player on the Portuguese team. There's nobody playing in South Africa on the Portuguese lineup. Everybody plays on a pretty decent, solid team. So, yeah, that's going to be no pushover. But let's say, who expected the 2002 U.S. team to beat the golden generation of Portugal at that World Cup? And we did. And
Portugal certainly did.
Yeah, Portugal, I'm sure they were shocked. So I don't think it would not be as big of a shock if we did it this time. People would say, yeah, USA, yeah, they're not wearing little boy pants anymore. They're wearing big boy pants. Maybe not as big a pants as the big boys in the top 10 in the world, but, we're no longer thought of as a minnow. This wouldn't be a minnow defeats a giant like it was in 2002. It would be a pretty darn good Portuguese team being beaten by a U.S. team who maybe just had a really good day and shut down Cristiano Ronaldo. It's possible. If you would have said USA beats Portugal in 2002, everyone would have laughed at you. No way is that happening. And then, of course, they went on and ended the group play by losing to Poland. But that's a whole other story.